Welcome back, family. If you joined us in part 1, you remember how the night ended with Elena lying awake beneath the weight of questions that clawed at her faith. She had counted down the hours to Wednesday morning, waiting for the test that would finally reveal if her body could do the one thing she'd prayed for her entire life, to carry life within her. It was a night drenched in fear, in silence, in faith that refused to die, even when hope felt like it was slipping away. And now, that morning has come, a day that will either break her or birth the first sign of her miracle. So if you're new here and you missed part 1, take a moment to go back and watch it right here on Mr. Reality Stories, because every tear, every prayer, and every moment of silence matters to what's about to happen next. And for everyone who's been following from the start, stay with me, because this chapter will test not just Elena's strength, but her faith. Let's begin. The doctor's verdict. Wednesday morning arrived wrapped in fog, the kind of November grey that made everything look underwater, distant, like a memory instead of the present tense. Elena woke at 5 a.m., even though her alarm wasn't set until 6. Couldn't eat, couldn't drink doctor's orders. Just shower, dress, drive to the clinic with an empty stomach and a full bladder for the ultrasound that would precede the retrieval. Nathan was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed in his sweatpants, staring at nothing. Couldn't sleep? Elena asked. Not really. You? Not really. They moved through the morning in choreographed silence, Nathan making coffee he drank alone, Elena swallowing her bitterness along with her desire for caffeine. They'd become experts at parallel living, at occupying the same space without colliding. The drive to the clinic took 37 minutes. Elena counted every one. Nathan's hand rested on her knee, a gesture of solidarity that felt increasingly performative. They were going through motions, playing roles, supportive husband, hopeful wife, couple united in purpose. But underneath the performance, Elena felt the truth. They were both terrified and alone, and growing more distant with every medical intervention. The clinic waiting room was empty at 8:30 a.m. They checked in, filled out paperwork, sat in chairs that had held countless other couples in various stages of hope and despair. Elena wondered if the chairs absorbed it all, that emotion, all those prayers, all those failures. If you could wring them out, what would pour forth? Elena Brooks? A nurse appeared, clipboard in hand, smile professionally warm. We're ready for you. Elena stood. Nathan made to follow. Just Mrs. Brooks for now, the nurse said kindly. You'll join us in the procedure room in about 20 minutes, Mr. Brooks. There's coffee in the family lounge. Family lounge. The term felt aspirational. Elena followed the nurse through double doors, down a hallway, into a pre-op room that smelled of antiseptic and nerves. She changed into a gown, hospital socks with grip treads, a hairnet that made her look like a sad lunch lady. Another nurse inserted an IV, took her blood pressure, asked the standard questions. When did you last eat? Any allergies? Do you understand the procedure? Elena understood. They would give her anesthesia, not general but conscious sedation, which meant she'd be awake but wouldn't remember anything. Then they'd insert an ultrasound probe and a needle through her vaginal wall, aspirate each follicle, extract the eggs. The whole thing would take 20 to 30 minutes. She'd wake up groggy, crampy, and either hopeful or devastated, depending on how many eggs they retrieved. Dr. Reed appeared, masked and gloved, radiating the calm competence of someone who'd done this hundreds of times. Good morning, Elena. How are you feeling? How was she feeling? Like her body was a construction site, like her identity hung on the success of the next 30 minutes. Like 7 years of faith were about to be weighed and measured by the number of eggs her ovaries could produce. Ready, Elena said, because it was expected. Good. Dr. Reed reviewed her chart. Follicles looked good on yesterday's ultrasound. We're hoping for 8 to 9 eggs. Remember, quality matters more than quantity. One good egg can make all the difference. One good egg, Elena clung to that. They wheeled her into the procedure room, bright lights, cold air, machines beeping their technological prayers. Nathan was there, dressed in scrubs, standing by her head. He took her hand. "You've got this," he whispered. The anesthesiologist approached. "You're going to feel sleepy. Count backward from 10 for me." Elena started counting. 10, 9, 8. The world tilted sideways into darkness. She woke to voices. "Total of 6 eggs retrieved. Quality looks reasonable. We'll update you this afternoon on fertilization." Elena blinked, trying to focus. She was in a recovery room. Nathan was beside her, his face carefully neutral. Dr. Reed stood at the foot of her bed, reviewing a tablet. "Welcome back," Dr. Reed said, looking up. "Procedure went well. We retrieved 6 mature eggs." 6, not 9, not 8, 6. Elena's foggy brain tried to process. "You said 9 follicles." "Not all follicles contain eggs," Dr. Reed explained gently. 3 were empty, but the 6 we got look good. They're being taken to the lab now for fertilization. We'll call you this afternoon with an update on how many fertilized overnight. 6 eggs. After 3 weeks of hormone hell, after bruises and mood swings and $20,000, her body had produced 6 eggs. 3 down from yesterday's ultrasound, half of what they'd hoped for. "What are our odds?" Nathan asked, his voice tight. Dr. Reed pulled up a chair, and Elena knew this was his bad news posture. "With 6 eggs, we'd typically expect 4 to 5 to fertilize normally. Of those, maybe 3 will develop to day 3, 2 might make it to day 5 for transfer. Your success rate per transfer is still around 20 to 25%. The math was brutal. 6 eggs, maybe 5 fertilized, maybe 3 developing, maybe 2 viable, maybe a 25% chance. "We'll know more as they develop, Doctor," Reed continued. "Try to rest today. We'll call with fertilization numbers this afternoon, then daily updates on their progress. Transfer will likely be on Monday if we have good embryos." If. That word, doing heavy lifting. Dr. Reed left. A nurse came in with crackers and juice, post-procedure protocol. Elena ate mechanically, tasting nothing, feeling the cramping in her abdomen where they'd punctured through to harvest her eggs. 6 eggs. The number circled her brain like a vulture. Nathan helped her dress, signed discharge papers, supported her to the car. The drive home was silent except for the GPS, occasionally recalculating their route as if they were lost, which they were, just not geographically. At home, Nathan settled Elena on the couch with pillows and blankets and water. "I'm going to make you soup," he announced, desperate for something useful to do. Elena closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but her mind wouldn't cooperate. 6 eggs. Was it enough? God, was it enough? Her phone buzzed. A text from Pastor Grace. "Praying for you today. However it unfolds, God's got you." Elena stared at the message. However it unfolds. That phrase doing its own heavy lifting, a spiritual disclaimer. God's got you, but maybe not in the way you want, maybe not at all. She set the phone down without responding. Nathan brought soup at noon, chicken noodle from a can, heated with love if not skill. Elena ate half, praised it like he'd cooked from scratch. They were getting good at these small kindnesses, these gentle lies that held marriage together when truth would tear it apart. At 2:47 p.m., Elena's phone rang. The clinic. Her hands shook as she answered. Nathan materialized beside her, his face tense. "Mrs. Brooks, this is Kara from Dr. Reed's office. I have your fertilization report." Elena put the phone on speaker so Nathan could hear. "Of your 6 eggs, 5 were mature enough to fertilize. We used ICSI intracytoplasmic sperm injection, and all 5 fertilized normally. So you have 5 embryos developing. That's excellent news." 5. Elena felt something like hope flicker. "We'll call you tomorrow with a day 2 update," Kara continued. "Then Friday with day 3, and Saturday with day 5. As long as they continue developing normally, we'll plan for a transfer on Monday." They thanked her, hung up, stared at each other. 5 embryos, Nathan said, and his voice cracked slightly. That's good, right? 5 is good? 5 is good, Elena echoed, wanting to believe it. They celebrated with takeout Chinese food and cautious optimism. 5 embryos, 5 chances. 5 possibilities that somewhere in that growing collection of cells was their child, their family, their answer to 7 years of prayer. That night, Elena slept better than she had in weeks. Thursday afternoon, the clinic called. 4 embryos still developing normally. 1 had arrested, stopped dividing, but 4 was still good. 4 was workable. Friday afternoon, 3 embryos looking strong. 1 more had arrested, but 3 was enough. 3 could work. Saturday morning, Elena woke to her phone, ringing at 8:17 a.m. Too early for a normal update. Her stomach dropped. Mrs. Brooks, this is Dr. Reed. Not the nurse. The doctor himself. Never a good sign. I wanted to call personally with your day 5 results, he continued. Of your 3 embryos that were developing, 2 have made it to blastocyst stage. That's the stage we need for transfer. 1 is grade 4AA, which is excellent quality. 1 is 3BB, which is good but slightly lower quality. We'd like to transfer the 4AA on Monday and freeze the 3BB for a future cycle if needed. 2 embryos. From 6 eggs to 2 embryos in 5 days. What happened to the 3rd? Elena asked, though she already knew. It arrested overnight. I'm sorry, but the 2 we have are good quality, especially the 4AA. That gives us a really solid chance on Monday. A solid chance, based on 2 embryos and 5 days of attrition. They scheduled the transfer for 10 a.m. Monday. Received instructions. Full bladder for ultrasound guidance, someone to drive her home after, take it easy for 48 hours post-transfer. Elena hung up and looked at Nathan. 2 embryos. 2 good embryos, Nathan corrected, finding the silver lining like he'd been trained to. But Elena couldn't find the lining. All she could see was the math. 6 eggs became 5, fertilized became 4, day 2 became 3, day 3 became 2, day 5, each stage a elimination. Each call a narrowing, each update a reminder that her biology was a funnel, not a fountain. Saturday and Sunday crawled by in anxious waiting. Elena tried to pray, but her prayers felt empty, rote, like saying words in a language she'd forgotten. Nathan tried to distract her with movies, meals out, normalcy, but normalcy was a country they'd been exiled from years ago. Sunday night, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in bed calculating odds, 25% success rate, 1 embryo transferred, 1 in 4 chance, 75% chance of failure. She'd gambled $20,000, 3 weeks of hormone hell, and what remained of her marriage on a coin flip weighted heavily toward devastation. Monday morning arrived cold and bright. Elena drank the required amount of water until her bladder was so full she could barely walk. They drove to the clinic in tense silence. The transfer room was smaller than the retrieval room, less clinical, almost cozy. They were trying for intimacy, Elena realized. Trying to make this moment inserting embryos into her uterus via catheter feel like conception instead of construction. She changed into a gown, climbed onto the table, feet in stirrups. Nathan stood by her head, holding her hand. Dr. Reed entered with an embryologist, carrying a small dish. "That's your embryo," the embryologist said, pointing to a microscope screen showing a tiny cluster of cells. "Beautiful 4AA blast, ready for transfer." Elena stared at the screen. Somewhere in that cluster was possibly her child. Possibly, maybe. If the 25% odds landed in her favor, the transfer itself took less than 5 minutes. Catheter inserted, embryo loaded, ultrasound guidance, gentle push, confirmation. Done. "You're officially pregnant until proven otherwise," Dr. Reed said with a smile. "Rest easy today. Normal activity tomorrow. Pregnancy test in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. 14 days. 336 hours between now and knowing whether she'd just wasted $20,000 or created a life. They drove home. Nathan helped her into bed, brought her lunch, downloaded movies to watch together. He was trying so hard, Elena could see the effort, feel the desperation beneath his cheerfulness. But she couldn't match it. She felt hollow, emptied out, like the last 7 years had been a slow evacuation of hope, and this transfer was the final exit, the last door closing. She touched her abdomen, where an embryo was possibly, maybe, hopefully, implanting. "Please," she prayed, "please let this work. Please don't let this have been for nothing." But the prayer felt thin, insubstantial, a wish tossed into wind that wouldn't carry it. Elena closed her eyes and tried to rest, knowing the next 2 weeks would be the longest of her life, knowing that at the end of them she would either finally have, retry, continue and conclude her answer, or face a devastation that might finally break what little remained of her hope. The tree pendant lay on her nightstand, its silver branches catching the afternoon light. Roots and branches, Nathan had said, hope and growth. But right now, Elena felt neither rooted nor growing, just suspended, waiting, drowning in the space between prayer and answer, between desire and reality, between the woman she'd been 7 years ago and the woman she was becoming, harder, hollier, haunted by the silence of a God who seemed to be looking everywhere except at her. Outside, children played in the street, their laughter floating through the closed windows like prophecy, like judgment, like the one question Elena couldn't escape. Why not me? The question echoed through the empty rooms of her heart. And heaven remained, as it had for 7 years, utterly, devastatingly silent. The 2-week wait was a special kind of torture, designed by the universe to test exactly how much a human soul could endure before shattering completely. Elena made it 8 days before buying a pregnancy test. She knew she wasn't supposed to. The clinic had been explicit. Wait the full 14 days, come in for the blood test, let them deliver results. Home pregnancy tests could give false negatives this early. They could drive you crazy with faint lines that meant nothing, or blank screens that meant everything, or maybe nothing at all. But waiting was killing her. The not knowing was worse than knowing could ever be. At least that's what she told herself as she stood in the pharmacy aisle at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday, staring at 40 different pregnancy tests like they were a multiple-choice exam in a language she'd never learned. She bought 3 different brands, just in case. Nathan was working late again. The community center project had hit complications, delays, problems that required his attention at all hours. Or maybe he was just avoiding home, avoiding her, avoiding the pressure cooker atmosphere of their apartment where hope and despair were locked in mortal combat. Elena waited until 10 p.m. when Nathan texted that he'd be another hour. Then she locked herself in the bathroom, unwrapped the first test, and followed the instructions she'd memorized from 7 years of practice. Pee on stick. Wait 3 minutes. Read result. She set the timer on her phone and sat on the edge of the bathtub, staring at the test lying on the counter. 3 minutes, 180 seconds, an eternity compressed into moments. The digital test blinked, processing. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Please, please, please. The timer buzzed. She picked up the test with shaking hands. Not pregnant. The words sat there, pixelated and absolute. Not pregnant, not now. Not after $20,000 and 3 weeks of hormones and 6 eggs and 5 fertilized and 2 embryos and 7 years of prayers. Not pregnant. Elena stared at the test until the words blurred, until her vision tunneled, until something inside her cracked so loudly she was surprised the sound didn't bring Nathan running from wherever he was hiding. She took the second test, same result. The third test, same verdict. 3 tests, 3 confirmations, 3 witnesses to her failure. Elena slid down to the bathroom floor, her back against the tub, and let herself break in a way she'd never broken before. Not quietly, not prettily. She sobbed like someone was dying, because someone was the dream, the hope, the belief that maybe this time would be different. She was still on the floor when Nathan came home at 11:23 p.m. She heard him call her name, heard his footsteps, heard the bathroom door open. "Elena?" She looked up at him through swollen eyes and held out the tests like evidence at a crime scene. Nathan's face went through several emotions in rapid succession: confusion, realization, devastation, then something that looked like resignation. "It's early," he said, crouching beside her. "The clinic said not to test early. It could be—" "It's not wrong." Elena's voice was raw. "3 tests, Nathan. 3 different brands. I'm not pregnant. The embryo didn't implant. It failed." "You don't know that?" "I know." And she did. Some knowledge comes from the body, from the absence of symptoms you've been praying for, from the familiar feeling of an empty womb that's been empty for 7 years. It didn't work. Nathan sat on the bathroom floor beside her, his expensive work slacks wrinkling against the tile, and pulled her into his arms. "We still have 1 frozen embryo," he said into her hair. "We can try again. Try again." Those words that had become the refrain of their marriage. Try again. Keep trying. Never stop trying. As if persistence alone could overcome biology, as if determination could fertilize eggs and implant embryos and create life where God had apparently decided none should exist. "I can't," Elena whispered. "Nathan, I can't do this again." She felt him tense. "You don't mean that." But she did. In this moment, on this bathroom floor, surrounded by negative tests and 7 years of accumulated grief, Elena meant it completely. She was done, finished, depleted. $20,000, she said, pulling back to look at him. 3 weeks of hormones that made me crazy. 6 eggs, 2 embryos, and nothing. Nothing to show for it except more debt and more disappointment and more proof that my body doesn't work. "Elena, your mother was right." The words came out bitter, poisonous. "I'm barren. God's closed my womb. And we can keep throwing money at doctors and hormones at my ovaries and prayers at heaven, but none of it matters because I cannot have children." "Stop it." Nathan's voice was sharp. "Don't let her poison you. Don't let one failed cycle." "One failed cycle?" Elena laughed, and it sounded unhinged even to her. "Nathan, I've failed for 7 years. This wasn't one cycle. This was the last cycle, the final proof. I'm not meant to be a mother. God's made that abundantly clear." They sat in silence, 2 people on a bathroom floor, surrounded by the wreckage of their last hope. Finally, Nathan spoke. "The blood test might be different. We should still go on Friday. Let them confirm." Elena knew he was right. Knew she should wait for official results. But she also knew her body. Knew the absence of pregnancy with the certainty of someone who'd been checking for its presence every month for 7 years. "Fine," she said, because arguing required energy she no longer possessed. "We'll do the blood test, but I already know the answer." They went to bed in silence. Elena lay awake until 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, feeling the phantom weight of an embryo that hadn't implanted, hadn't survived, hadn't become the child she'd mortgaged their future for. At some point, Nathan's breathing evened into sleep. Elena envied him that the ability to escape, to rest, to temporarily forget the disaster unfolding in slow motion. She couldn't forget, couldn't escape, could only lie there calculating $20,000 gone, 1 frozen embryo remaining, another $15,000 if they wanted to try a frozen transfer. More hormones, more hope, more inevitable devastation when her body rejected that embryo too. The math didn't work, the biology didn't work, the prayers didn't work. Nothing worked except time, which kept moving forward even when Elena wanted it to stop, to pause, to give her a moment to catch her breath before the next wave of grief hit. Friday came too soon, and not soon enough. Elena sat in the clinic's phlebotomy chair while a technician drew blood for the official pregnancy test. Nathan waited in the lobby. She'd insisted on going alone, needing these last moments of uncertainty before certainty destroyed her completely. "Results should be ready by 2 p.m., the technician said cheerfully. "We'll call you." Elena nodded, pressed cotton to the needle site, and walked out into a November morning that was unseasonably warm, as if the weather itself was mocking her with its refusal to reflect her internal winter. She drove to the church office because she couldn't bear going home, couldn't bear sitting in that apartment, waiting for the phone to ring with news she already knew. Jennifer looked up when Elena entered. "How are you feeling? I've been praying." "I'm fine," Elena said automatically, heading to her desk before Jennifer could ask more questions, offer more prayers, deliver more platitudes about God's timing and mysterious ways. She tried to work, answered phones, formatted the bulletin, but every cell in her body was oriented toward 2 p.m., toward the call that would officially confirm her failure. At 1:47 p.m., her phone rang. Too early. But maybe they'd processed results quickly. Maybe. "Mrs. Brooks, this is Nurse Cara. I have your beta results." Elena's hand tightened on the phone. Beta, the blood test, measuring HCG, the pregnancy hormone. If the number was over 50, you were pregnant. Under 5, you weren't. "Your beta is less than 1, Cara said gently. "I'm so sorry, but the cycle was unsuccessful. The embryo did not implant." Less than 1. Not even a trace, not even a hint, just absence quantified and official. "We'd like to schedule a follow-up with Dr. Reed to discuss next steps," Cara continued. "You still have 1 frozen embryo. When you're ready." "Thank you," Elena interrupted, her voice mechanical. "I'll call back to schedule." She hung up before Cara could say more, before she could offer condolences or encouragement or suggest that next time might be different. Elena sat at her desk, staring at her computer screen, trying to remember how to breathe. Less than 1. The number felt biblical. Less than nothing, a quantification of absence, a medical measurement of emptiness. Her phone buzzed, Nathan calling. She let it go to voicemail, couldn't talk to him. Couldn't hear his voice, trying to find silver linings in disaster. Couldn't endure his optimism about the frozen embryo. Couldn't survive his well-meaning attempts to keep hope alive when hope was the thing killing them both. Elena stood, told Jennifer she felt sick, not a lie, and left the office. She drove, not home, not to the clinic, just drove, following roads that led nowhere specific, until she found herself in the parking lot of New Covenant Fellowship, her church. Pastor Grace's church. The building was empty on a Friday afternoon, but the side door was unlocked. Elena slipped inside, walked through the quiet halls to the sanctuary, and sat in the back pew where she'd sat for 3 years, listening to sermons about God's faithfulness, God's timing, God's plans that were supposedly better than hers. The sanctuary was dim, lit only by afternoon light filtering through stained glass windows. Elena stared at the altar, at the cross hanging above it, and tried to pray. But no words came, just anger. Raw, burning anger at a God who seemed to give children to everyone except her. To teenagers who didn't want them, to women who abused them, to people like Margaret who already had grandchildren and still demanded more. But not to Elena, not to the woman who'd prayed faithfully, lived righteously, done everything she was supposed to do. Not to the woman who'd want these children, love these children, treasure these children. Why? The question echoed through the empty sanctuary, bounced off walls that had heard countless prayers, but apparently hadn't delivered hers. Why not me, God? What did I do wrong? Why do you keep saying no? Elena? She turned. Pastor Grace stood in the sanctuary doorway, her silver locks pulled back, her dark eyes kind and sad and knowing. Jennifer called, Pastor Grace said, walking down the aisle. Said you left upset. I had a feeling I'd find you here. Elena wanted to lie, to say she was fine, to maintain the facade. But she was too tired, too empty, too devastated. It didn't work, she said simply. The IVF, the embryo didn't implant. I'm not pregnant. Pastor Grace sat beside her and for a long moment said nothing, just sat, present, witnessing. I'm so sorry, she finally said. Everyone's sorry, Elena heard herself say, bitterness coating every word. Everyone's been sorry for 7 years, but sorry doesn't fix my ovaries. Sorry doesn't make God answer prayers. Sorry doesn't change the fact that I'm 32 years old and barren, and my husband would be better off with someone whose body actually works. Elena. It's true, though. Elena turned to look at Pastor Grace. Margaret was right. God's closed my womb, and I keep praying and believing and hoping, but nothing changes. So, either God doesn't care, or I've done something to deserve this, or prayer is just shouting into the void. Pastor Grace's expression remained gentle, unshocked by Elena's anger. You haven't done anything to deserve this, she said firmly. This isn't punishment. Then what is it? Elena demanded. What possible purpose does this serve? What am I supposed to learn from 7 years of disappointment? How is this making me more faithful, more righteous, more anything except more broken? I don't know, Pastor Grace said, and her honesty was somehow more comforting than platitudes would have been. I don't know why God says no to some prayers and yes to others. I don't know why faithful women struggle with infertility while others conceive without trying. I don't understand divine timing or sovereignty or any of the theological answers that sound good in sermons but feel hollow in suffering. Elena stared at her. This wasn't what pastors were supposed to say. They were supposed to offer hope, promise, breakthrough, quote Romans 8:28 about all things working together for good. What I do know, Pastor Grace continued, is that God sees you, that your tears matter, that this grief is holy, and your anger is heard, and your questions don't disqualify you from His love. It doesn't feel like love, Elena whispered. It feels like abandonment. Pastor Grace reached for Elena's hand. I know, and I'm not going to tell you to just have faith, or just keep trying, or just trust His timing, because you've done all that. You've been faithful through this wilderness. And it's okay to be angry. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to tell God exactly how you feel. I already did, Elena said. He doesn't seem to be listening. Oh, He's listening, Pastor Grace said softly. Sometimes His answers just look different than we expect. Sometimes the miracle isn't the thing we're asking for. Sometimes it's what happens to us in the waiting, in the breaking, in the dark. Elena pulled her hand away. I don't want to be transformed by suffering. I just want a baby. I know you do, beloved. I know. They sat in silence, two women in an empty sanctuary, one broken and one witnessing the breaking. What do I do now? Elena finally asked. We have one frozen embryo left. Nathan wants to try again, but I don't know if I can survive another failure. Then don't decide today, Pastor Grace said. Today, just grieve. Just feel what you're feeling. Give yourself permission to be devastated. The decision about next steps can wait. Elena nodded, though she wasn't sure she believed it. In her experience, waiting never made decisions easier, it just prolonged the agony. Her phone buzzed again. Nathan, probably, or the clinic, or Jennifer checking on her. The world kept moving, kept demanding responses, kept refusing to pause for her grief. I should go, Elena said, standing. Pastor Grace stood too, pulled Elena into a hug that the younger woman didn't have the strength to resist. I'm praying for you, she whispered. Not for pregnancy, not for a specific outcome, just praying that in this wilderness you'll feel the presence that doesn't abandon us, even when heaven seems silent. Elena nodded against Pastor Grace's shoulder, accepted the prayer, even if she couldn't quite believe it would matter. She left the church, drove home, and found Nathan pacing the living room. I've been calling you, he said, relief and frustration mixing in his voice. Kara called me when you didn't answer. I know the results. Elena, I'm so sorry. Don't, Elena said, holding up a hand. Please don't. I can't do the comforting conversation right now. I can't process your feelings about my failure. I just need... She didn't finish, didn't know how to finish, just walked past him to the bedroom, closed the door, and climbed into bed fully clothed at 4:30 inches the afternoon. She heard Nathan outside the door, heard him start to knock, then stop, heard his footsteps retreat, heard the apartment door open and close as he left going where, she didn't know, didn't care. Elena lay in the darkening room, feeling the weight of 7 years pressed down on her chest. 7 years of negative tests, 7 years of empty arms. 7 years of prayers that went nowhere, of faith that bore no fruit, of hope that kept promising and never delivering. And now, after everything, the hormones, the procedures, the debt, the last desperate gamble, still nothing. Less than 1, the blood test had said. Elena pressed her hand to her flat stomach and tried to grieve the embryo that never implanted, the child that never was, the future that kept receding like a mirage. But she couldn't cry, couldn't pray, couldn't do anything except lie there in the growing dark, feeling the tree pendant heavy around her neck. Roots and branches, Nathan had promised. But all Elena felt was withering. All she felt was dying. And somewhere beyond her grief, in a heaven that seemed more distant with every passing year, God was silent. Or, speaking in a language Elena no longer understood, or gone entirely. She couldn't tell which, and increasingly, she couldn't tell if it mattered. The night fell around her like judgment, and Elena let it come. 3 weeks after the failed IVF cycle, Elena and Nathan still weren't talking about what came next. They were talking around it, discussing bills, work, what to have for dinner, surface conversations that skated carefully over the frozen embryo, waiting in a lab somewhere, their last biological chance gathering frost while they gathered courage neither of them possessed. Nathan wanted to try again. He hadn't said it directly, but Elena could read it in every gentle question about when she'd call doctor. Read every article he left open on his laptop about frozen embryo transfer success rates every time he touched her stomach with a longing he tried to hide. Elena didn't know what she wanted, or more accurately, she wanted to try again, wanted to access the hope that had sustained her for 7 years. But that well was dry, poisoned by $20,000 of failure and the growing certainty that her body was simply broken beyond medical repair. The distance between them grew measurable. Nathan came home later from work. Elena went to bed earlier. They stopped reaching for each other at night, their shared bed becoming 2 separate islands of restless sleep. On a Tuesday evening in early December, Nathan came home at 9:30 p.m., the 4th late night that week. Elena was on the couch, pretending to watch TV, actually staring through it. "Sorry," Nathan said, dropping his briefcase. "Problem at the site. Had to—" "It's fine." Elena's voice was flat. She'd stopped caring where he was, what he was doing, stopped caring about most things, actually. She was going through motions, playing the role of wife the way an actress plays a part she's grown to hate. Nathan sat on the opposite end of the couch. The physical distance between them, 3 cushions, maybe 4 feet, felt symbolic. "We need to talk," he said. 4 words that never preceded anything good. Elena muted the TV, turned to face him. "Okay." Nathan rubbed his face, that gesture he made when stressed. "I called Dr. Reed's office yesterday about scheduling the frozen transfer." Elena's stomach tightened. "Without asking me. I'm asking you now." "That's not the same thing." Nathan's jaw clenched. "Elena, we've been avoiding this conversation for 3 weeks. We have 1 embryo left. We're paying storage fees. At some point, we have to decide." "You've decided," Elena said. "You want to do it?" "Yes, I do." Nathan leaned forward, elbows on knees. "We've come this far. We have 1 more shot. Why would we give up now?" "Maybe because I can't take another failure," Elena said quietly. "Maybe because going through that again might actually break me in ways I can't come back from." "You don't know it will fail. And you don't know it will work." Elena stood, needed movement, space. "Nathan, the odds are still 25%, still 1 in 4. Still more likely to fail than succeed. And I'm telling you honestly, I don't think I can survive another negative test." "So you just want to give up?" Nathan's voice rose. "After 7 years, after everything, you just want to quit?" "I want to stop hurting," Elena shouted back, all the restraint she'd been holding for weeks finally breaking. "I want to stop living in 2-week cycles of hope and devastation. I want to stop measuring my worth by my ovaries and my marriage by my fertility. I want to stop trying to fix something that God clearly doesn't intend to be fixed." The words hung in the air between them, raw and true and dangerous. Nathan stood, his face pale. You think God doesn't intend us to have children? I think God has had 7 years to give us children and hasn't. Elena's voice cracked. I think we've prayed and tried and believed and nothing has changed. I think maybe this is his answer and we're just too stubborn to accept it. I don't believe that, Nathan said fiercely. I don't believe God brought us this far to abandon us now. How far is this, Nathan? Elena gestured around their apartment. We're in debt. We barely talk. We haven't had sex in months unless it was scheduled around ovulation. We don't laugh anymore. We don't dream anymore. We just exist in this holding pattern of disappointment. Is this really where you think God wanted us? Nathan's expression shifted, hurt, replacing anger. What are you saying? Elena took a breath, voiced the thought that had been haunting her since Margaret's dinner. I'm saying maybe your mother was right. Maybe I should let you go. Maybe you deserve someone who can give you what you want. Stop. Nathan crossed to her, grabbed her shoulders. Stop letting her poison you. Stop suggesting we should divorce. I'm not suggesting divorce. I'm suggesting honesty. Elena met his eyes. You want children. I might not be able to give them to you. At some point, you have to ask yourself if this is the life you want. I want a life with you, Nathan said, but there was something desperate in it, something that sounded less like certainty and more like hope. Do you? Elena pulled away from his grasp. Or do you want children and you're hoping I come attached? The question landed like a grenade. Nathan stared at her, and Elena saw the moment he wanted to lie, wanted to say the right thing, wanted to be the husband who loved his wife unconditionally, regardless of reproductive capacity. But the pause before his answer told her everything. I want both, he finally said. I want you, and I want children. Why do those have to be mutually exclusive? Because I might not be able to give you both, Elena said tiredly. That's the reality we're living in, Nathan. You can't have everything you want. So which matters more? That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. Elena sank onto the couch, exhausted by the fight, by the marriage, by the constant negotiation between what was and what should have been. But we have to face it. We have one frozen embryo. If we do the transfer and it fails, then what? Do we try again with donor eggs? Do we adopt? Do we accept childlessness? Do we go separate ways so you can find someone else? I don't want someone else, Nathan said, sitting beside her again. Elena, I love you. That hasn't changed. But you resent me. She said it gently without accusation. Just fact. Nathan opened his mouth to deny it, then closed it. And in that silence, Elena found her confirmation. I understand, she said. I resent me too. They sat in the quiet of their damaged marriage, two people who'd loved each other once, who maybe still loved each other, but who were drowning in the weight of unfulfilled expectations and biology that refused to cooperate. What do you want to do? Nathan asked finally. Elena considered. What did she want? To stop hurting, to stop hoping, to stop being defined by her empty uterus, to feel like herself again, whoever that was. I don't know, she admitted. I need time to think. Can we table the frozen embryo decision for now? Just take a break from the fertility stuff and try to remember how to be married without it being about making babies. Nathan was quiet for a long moment. Okay, he said, we can take a break, but Elena, eventually we have to decide. We can't leave that embryo in limbo forever. I know. They went to bed that night without resolving anything, without touching, without the intimacy that used to come naturally. Elena lay on her side of the bed, Nathan on his, and the space between them felt less like distance and more like geography, a landscape of grief and resentment and love that was struggling to survive the weight of everything it carried. Elena touched the tree pendant she still wore out of habit more than hope, roots and branches, their 7th anniversary gift. Back when they'd still believed in metaphors, in symbols, in futures that grew instead of withered. Outside, December wind rattled the windows. Christmas was coming, another holiday season of awkward family photos and questions about when they'd have kids, and Elena's forced smile wearing thinner each year. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, tried not to think about the frozen embryo waiting in limbo, tried not to calculate how much longer their marriage could withstand this pressure, and failed at all three. The tree pendant felt heavy against her chest, and Elena wondered if trees could die from the roots up, slowly, invisibly, until one day they looked fine from the outside but inside were completely, irreversibly hollow. She suspected she was about to find out. Christmas came and went in a blur of forced cheer and careful avoidance. They'd skipped Margaret's holiday gathering, Nathan citing work commitments in a phone call that fooled no one. His mother's voice on speakerphone had been pure ice. "How convenient. I'm sure your childless wife appreciates your loyalty." Nathan had hung up, and they'd spent Christmas alone in their apartment, exchanging small gifts that felt like consolation prizes. Elena gave him a new watch. Nathan gave her a spa day certificate. Neither mentioned the empty space under their modest tree where a nursery monitor or baby clothes should have been. By New Year's Eve, their marriage was operating on autopilot. Polite, distant, functional, but not alive. The frozen embryo sat in storage, a decision they kept postponing, a future they couldn't commit to. Then came the night everything almost shattered completely. It was a Thursday in mid-January. Elena had worked a full day at the church office, come home to an empty apartment, Nathan texting that he'd be late again, and made herself dinner for one. She was washing dishes when her phone rang. Unknown number, probably spam, but she answered anyway. "Mrs. Brooks, this is Kara from Dr. Reed's office." Elena's hands stilled in the dishwater. "Hi. I'm calling because we haven't heard from you about your frozen embryo. Our records show it's been in storage for 8 weeks. We'd like to schedule a follow-up consultation to discuss next steps." Next steps. That phrase again, as if moving forward was inevitable, as if stopping wasn't an option. "I'm not ready yet," Elena said. "I understand." Kara's voice was professionally sympathetic. "But I should let you know that storage fees are accruing $50 per month, and there are some time-sensitive considerations. The longer we wait, the more the quality could potentially degrade." "I said I'm not ready." Elena's voice came out sharper than intended. "When I'm ready, I'll call." She hung up before Kara could respond, then stood at the sink, hands shaking, staring at soapy water like it held answers. $50 per month. Time-sensitive considerations, quality degradation. Even the embryo was a ticking clock, a deadline, a pressure she couldn't escape. Elena dried her hands, poured herself a glass of wine, the first alcohol she'd had in 7 years, because who cared anymore, really? And sat on the couch in the dark. Nathan came home at 10:47 p.m., later than usual. Elena was on her second glass of wine, which meant she was past caring about being the perfect wife, past filtering her thoughts. "You're drinking," Nathan observed, setting down his briefcase. "Excellent observation skills." Elena raised her glass in mock salute. "Must be why you're such a successful architect." Nathan's expression shifted surprise, then concern. "Are you okay?" Elena laughed, and it sounded slightly unhinged. "Am I okay?" "No, Nathan, I'm not okay. The clinic called about our frozen embryo. Apparently, we're paying storage fees and need to make decisions, and time is running out." Nathan sat across from her, careful, like approaching a wounded animal. "What did you tell them?" "That I'm not ready," which is true. Elena took another sip of wine. "But the question is, when will I be ready? Next month? Next year? Never." "Elena." "Where were you tonight?" she interrupted, leaning forward. "Really? And don't say work. I called your office at 8:30. Janine said you left at 7. Nathan's jaw tightened. "I went for a drive, needed to think." "About what?" "About us. About this marriage. About whether..." He trailed off, but Elena heard what he didn't say. "Whether you made a mistake," she finished for him. "Whether you should have listened to your mother, whether you're wasting your life with a broken woman." "That's not what I was thinking." "Isn't it?" Elena set down her wineglass with deliberate care. Because I've been thinking the same thing, that maybe we're just prolonging the inevitable. That maybe 7 years of infertility is God's way of saying we're not meant to do any of this together. Nathan stood abruptly, started pacing. You're drunk. I'm 2 glasses in. There's a difference. Elena watched him pace, this man she'd loved for 8 years, who now felt like a stranger. But alcohol doesn't make me wrong. It just makes me honest. And honestly, I think we're both miserable. I think we've been miserable for years. We just keep pretending because divorce feels like failure. Marriage is supposed to be hard. This isn't hard, Nathan. Hard is working through differences. Hard is compromise. What we're doing is survival. We're 2 people drowning, and instead of saving each other, we're just pulling each other under. Nathan stopped pacing, turned to face her. What are you saying? Elena took a breath, said the thing she'd been thinking for weeks, but had been too scared to voice. I'm saying maybe we should separate, not divorce, not yet, but sometime apart. Some space to figure out if we even want to stay married. The words hung in the air like smoke, toxic and real. Nathan stared at her. You want to separate? I want to stop hurting each other, Elena clarified. And right now, being together is just constant pain. Every day is a reminder of what we don't have, what we can't be, what we've failed at. Maybe if we step back, we can breathe, we can figure out who we are without this pressure. Or we can figure out we're better off alone, Nathan said bitterly. Maybe we are. Elena stood, walked to the window, looked out at the winter night. Maybe 7 years of infertility is a message we're refusing to hear. Maybe God's telling us this marriage isn't meant to produce children. Maybe it's not meant to survive at all. I don't believe that, Nathan said, but his voice lacked conviction. What do you believe? Elena turned to face him. Really? Not what you're supposed to believe, not what your vows say you should believe. What do you actually believe about us? Nathan was quiet for a long time. Outside, a siren wailed past ambulance or police, impossible to tell, both carrying emergencies to their inevitable conclusions. I believe I love you, Nathan finally said. I believe I don't want to give up. But do you believe we can survive this? Elena pressed. Because love isn't enough if we're destroying each other in the process. Nathan crossed to her, and for a moment Elena thought he would argue, would fight, would pull her close and insist they could make it work. Instead, he said, I don't know. I honestly don't know anymore. The admission broke something in Elena, not her heart, that was already broken, but her last resistance to the truth she'd been avoiding. They were failing, not just at having children, at being married. I think I should stay somewhere else for a while, Nathan said quietly. Give us both some space. Elena wanted to argue, to say they could work through it, to insist on trying harder, but she was too tired, too empty, too aware that separation might be mercy rather than failure. Okay, she whispered. Nathan went to the bedroom, started packing a bag. Elena stayed by the window, listening to drawers opening, hangers scraping, zippers closing, the sounds of a marriage pausing, possibly ending. When Nathan emerged with his duffel bag, he stopped in the doorway. I'll stay at James's. We can talk in a few days. Figure out next steps. Next steps. That phrase haunting them everywhere. Nathan? Elena turned from the window. The frozen embryo. We need to decide soon. He nodded slowly. What do you want to do with it? Elena looked at this man she'd married, this man who wanted children she couldn't give him, this man who might walk out that door and never come back. I don't know. But it's not fair to keep you tied to me while we figure it out. If you want to, if you meet someone else, someone who can actually give you a family. Don't, Nathan's voice cracked. Don't make this about that. But it is about that, Elena said gently. It's always been about that. Nathan stood in the doorway for another moment, looking like he wanted to say something else, something that might fix this. But there were no words left that hadn't already been said, no promises left that hadn't already been broken. He left. Elena heard his car start, heard him drive away, and then the apartment was silent in a way it had never been before. Not the silence of waiting for him to come home, the silence of genuinely being alone. She walked through rooms that suddenly felt too large, too empty. 7 years of marriage, and it had come to this: her husband staying at his brother's house, their last embryo in frozen storage, their future a question mark. Neither of them knew how to answer. Elena sat on their bed, her bed now, she supposed, and finally let herself cry. Not for the babies she'd never have, not even for the marriage that was crumbling, but for the girl she'd been 8 years ago, standing at an altar, promising forever, believing in fairy tales and happy endings, and a God who answered prayers. That girl was dead now. 7 years of infertility had killed her slowly, replaced her with this harder, holier version who didn't believe in much of anything anymore. Her phone buzzed. A text from Nathan. "I'm sorry for everything. I love you. I just don't know if love is enough." Elena stared at the message, typed and deleted several responses, finally settled on, "Me neither." She lay back on the bed, still fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in a medical facility, her last embryo waited in cryogenic suspension, a possibility frozen in time. Somewhere in the universe, God was either watching her suffering with compassion or indifference. She no longer knew which, no longer knew if it mattered. The tree pendant caught the light from the street lamp outside. Elena unclasped it, held it in her palm. 7 months since their anniversary. 7 months since Nathan had given her this symbol of roots and branches and hope. She should throw it away, should mail it back to Nathan with a note saying she didn't need false symbols anymore. Should accept that some trees were meant to remain barren, some marriages were meant to fail, some prayers were meant to go unanswered. Instead, she set it on the nightstand and closed her eyes. And somewhere between waking and sleep, Elena whispered one more prayer, not for pregnancy, not for marriage, not for any specific outcome. Just, "Help me, please. I can't do this anymore. Help me." It was the most honest prayer she'd prayed in years. And in the silence that followed, Elena felt nothing. No presence, no peace, no answer. Just the hollow echo of her own voice in an empty apartment. She fell asleep alone for the first time in 7 years of marriage, and didn't know if Nathan would ever come back. The separation became weeks, then months. Nathan stayed at James and Sarah's, sleeping on their couch, surrounded by twin babies who screamed at 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. And basically all the hours Nathan had once imagined spending with his own children. It was torture, but perhaps the kind he thought he deserved. Elena stayed in their apartment, going through motions. Work at the church, groceries for one, sleeping diagonally across a bed that felt too large and too empty. She and Nathan texted occasionally about logistics bills, mail, the frozen embryo they still hadn't decided about. They didn't talk about reconciliation, didn't talk about divorce, just existed in limbo, two people too tired to fight and too broken to heal. February arrived grey and cold. Elena's 33rd birthday passed with a cupcake from Jennifer and a text from Nathan she didn't answer. The clinic sent another bill for embryo storage. Elena paid it automatically, postponing the decision another month. In March, Pastor Grace invited Elena to coffee. They sat in a quiet corner of a local cafe, steam rising from their cups like prayers. "How are you really doing?" Pastor Grace asked. Elena stirred her coffee, watching cream swirl into darkness. "I don't know anymore. Some days I'm fine. Some days I can barely get out of bed. Most days I'm just numb." "And Nathan?" "We text about bills." Elena's laugh was hollow, very romantic. Nothing says eternal love like, "Did you pay the electric company?" Pastor Grace's expression remained gentle, non-judgmental. "Have you two considered counseling?" "We can't afford it. The IVF wiped out our savings." Elena took a sip of coffee she didn't taste. "Besides, I'm not sure counseling can fix biology. I can't have kids." "He wants kids. That's not something you can compromise on." "Is that what this is really about?" Pastor Grace leaned forward slightly. Or is it about feeling like you've failed at the one thing you thought defined your worth? The question landed with uncomfortable precision. Elena set down her cup. I have failed. My body doesn't work. 7 years of proof. Your worth isn't in your womb, Elena. Tell that to Margaret. Tell that to every church lady who asks when I'm having kids. Tell that to God, who apparently decided I'm not meant to be a mother. Pastor Grace was quiet for a moment. Can I tell you something? Something I've never shared from the pulpit? Elena nodded. I can't have children either, Pastor Grace said softly. Medical reasons. Discovered it when I was 35, after years of what I thought was just bad timing. My husband and I went through 5 years of grief, anger, bargaining with God. We tried everything, IVF, adoption applications, even considered surrogacy. Nothing worked out. Elena stared at her pastor with new understanding. I didn't know. Most people don't. I don't advertise it. Pastor Grace smiled sadly. But I'm telling you because I want you to know that surviving this is possible. Not easy, not quick. But possible? My marriage survived stronger, actually, once we stopped fighting biology and started fighting for each other. And my calling didn't disappear just because my womb was empty. I learned to mother in different ways, through ministry, through mentoring, through loving people who aren't biologically mine. But you wanted children, Elena said. You grieved that loss. Still do sometimes. Pastor Grace's eyes glistened. Even 20 years later, there are moments, weddings, baby dedications, Mother's Day, where the grief resurfaces. But it doesn't define me anymore. It's part of my story, but not the whole story. Elena absorbed this, trying to imagine a future where infertility was just one chapter rather than the entire book. What about Nathan? She asked quietly. How did your husband handle it? Grief, anger, a period where he pulled away, not unlike what you're describing. We almost divorced. Pastor Grace's voice was steady, factual. But eventually, we had to ask ourselves, do we want to be married? Not, do we want children, but do we want each other? And the answer was, yes. So we built a different life than we'd planned. No less meaningful, just different. Elena wanted to believe it was possible, wanted to believe she and Nathan could find their way back to each other, but the distance between them felt insurmountable now. We still have one frozen embryo, Elena said. We can't even decide what to do with it. Nathan wants to try. I can't face another failure, so we just don't talk about it. Elena, you know you can't leave it in limbo forever. I know, Elena's voice broke slightly, but making a decision means facing reality. If we don't transfer it, we're admitting defeat. If we do transfer it and it fails, we're done, out of options. And I don't know if our marriage survives that final failure. Pastor Grace reached across the table, took Elena's hand. What if it's not about the embryo at all? What if the real question is, what do you want? Not what Nathan wants, not what your in-laws expect, not what you think you should want. What does your heart actually desire? Elena tried to access her heart, but it felt so buried under years of disappointment and expectation that she couldn't find it. I want to stop hurting, she finally said. That's all I know. I want the pain to stop. Then maybe that's where you start, Pastor Grace said gently. Not with the embryo decision, not with saving your marriage, but with your own healing. Everything else can wait until you're strong enough to face it. They talked for another hour. Pastor Grace didn't offer platitudes or promise breakthroughs, just witnessed Elena's pain and validated it in a way that felt like its own kind of healing. Sometimes, when life has taken everything, God doesn't rush to replace it. He waits until your heart is quiet enough to hear him whisper, I'm still writing your story. As went back home from the coffee time with Pastor Grace, she saw her husband's car parked outside. Elena didn't know what waited behind that door. Was it reconciliation or another heartbreak? But deep down, she felt something different, a calm that only comes before a miracle. Comment below. Do you believe God still restores broken hearts? And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter of this unbelievable true-to-life story. Stay tuned for part 3, The Miracle and the Promise. If you haven't watched part 1, make sure you do. It's where this powerful journey began. The night tears turned into prayers,